Why are young men getting more right-wing? 38M. I have always been a leftist and still am one. The truth is that the left is spitting on young straight men. They have no reason at all to support the left. My theory, and two, for over a generation and a half, men have been encouraged to reject traditional masculinity, embrace empathy, and practice equality, all of which are valid and necessary ideals. However, now that many have adopted these qualities, pop culture and social media are flooded with questions like, where have all the real men gone? And nostalgic calls for a return to traditional masculinity. This contradiction has left many young men feeling confused about their role in society, and uncertain about what is considered acceptable or manly. In this void, right-wing ideology offers a sense of clarity and reassurance, providing answers to their internal conflicts about identity, behavior, and masculinity. Imagine if someone said something really sexist or racist to you with a straight face. Then imagine being punished or insulted for being upset about it. Then imagine half of society tacitly supporting the person who insulted you, refusing to call them out. Then imagine the same person who said those racist, sexist things about you priding themselves on being anti-racism and anti-sexism. I try not to get drawn into this stuff, but sometimes it really feels like people feel way too comfortable saying the most out-of-pocket, vile stuff about dudes, and nobody on the left seems prepared to call those people out on their behavior, so it gains momentum. I'm not even on the right or anywhere close, but I can understand dudes being uncomfortable on the left where hating them unconditionally seems to be allowed, tolerated at the very least. 1. Too many of them are treated as the enemy by the left, particularly heterosexual, white men. If there's a small disagreement with the left's philosophy, they are often casted as the devil by too many left-wingers, not all, but too many. 2. Not once in Harris' campaign did they ever address what they were going to do for heterosexual males and the problems they face today. Did it for women, minorities, and the LGBTQ community. But hetero men? Not a peep. I explained this to a male liberal friend of mine, and he went off on a tangent about how it was bullshit because heterosexual men, particularly white men, have nothing to complain about in his eyes. I mean, nothing to complain or be worried about at all? Good grief. Because the left has been pretty hostile to them lately. And the examples of the left bashing on men is very much all over right-winging social media. Because the left has spent the past few decades collectively demonizing men, blaming them for every social ill possible and treating any problem they might have as trivial compared to any problem a woman might have. With all that in mind, all it takes is right-wing politicians telling young men, "I acknowledge you," to have them gravitate towards them. A lot of the Republican campaigning was done in internet spaces, podcasts, and interviews with content creators. Spaces that young people are more likely to view as opposed to the news. Young people also prefer real and authentic settings and dialogue. When Trump talks about the country being in a shit place and taking part in unscripted interviews, it comes across as real and authentic because many people are experiencing exactly that. Meanwhile, the Democrats stuck to heavily scripted news-related interviews while preaching about joy. This wasn't what the average person was experiencing, and frankly it showed the Dems to be completely blind to reality and inauthentic. Another issue I take with, as a young white man who votes conservative, is that we have liberal women trying to tell men what it means to be a man. I've never walked in a woman's shoes, so I don't tell women that they have to meet some arbitrary definition of what it means to be a woman. Likewise, women should stop telling men how to be men. People always go on about toxic masculinity, but toxic femininity and misandry are extremely prevalent within young liberal circles. The left blames everything on white men. They got tired of listening to it. This question, I feel, has a lot more nuance than people here would make you believe. If I could recommend you look up Professor Scott Galloway, who has done a lot of talks on this topic and can give you some fresh perspective. I guess what he'll never understand is how someone molds their ideology to belong to the group that accepts them. I lean left on most issues, but those beliefs were formed before I even knew what Democrats and Republicans believed in. I went to the group that aligned with my beliefs. I wasn't looking for a group to align to. But perhaps that's the key. These young men are being molded to align with right-leaning beliefs before they even know what a Republican or Democrat is, all because progressive spaces that could mold them in the opposite direction have kicked them out. Next thing you know, an election comes around and all these new voters find that Republicanism makes more sense to me. It's like, well yeah, because that's the environment you grew up in. As a young man leftist, the left does a terrible job appealing to us. There are almost no positive male role models in left-leaning circles, and misandry is not uncommon from some of the more interesting leftists. Not at all the majority, but it's enough that it's a problem that needs addressing. I would consider myself a feminist, but I find it hard to engage with some more radical feminist spaces when they constantly say shit like all men are pigs unironically. Even if they don't actually mean all men, that's the message I get, and it's hard to want to support people that I feel like hate a fundamental part of my identity. I hate the patriarchy, and am of course willing to discuss all manner of things relating to it and how it favors men in many ways. But goddammit, stop projecting your hatred of the patriarchy onto men that have nothing to do with its establishment. If leftists are surprised about young men leaning more right, I think they need some more self-awareness. If the left wants men to support them, they need to make it look like they actually want our support. And again, I say this as someone who leans very heavily left. Because mainstream left-wing media and narratives said they were the villains for nearly a decade, why the fuck do you think? The left has abandoned men, specifically white men, cisgendered men. They've been told they don't need help and they are the cause of the world's problem. I voted Harris, but I can see why. There's an awful lot of hate towards white people, especially white men in the Democratic Party. It's the one race gender that's an open punching bag expected to just take it on the chin. Well, white guys don't like to be blamed for everything. Woke progressives usually suck. They are insufferable to hang out with. We were just born into this word like anyone else. I didn't choose my skin color, family, or gender. I'd rather not get openly made fun of because I'm a white male. I think a lot of it also has to do with the younger generation having less sex and a response by men to try to get more masculine. I'm sure most men notice female hypocrisy when it comes to the ideal male versus what they are physically attracted to, and I think this creates distrust in men as well. Women pretend to like a liberal, soft-spoken man, but when it comes time to sex and dating, it's often the case that women are attracted to the physically aggressive douche. I think a lot of guys see hypocrisy in women demanding men around them be less straight, less white, etc., but then get drunk and sleep with and develop a crush for the biggest meathead one could imagine. Honestly, it's the news and the media that pushes one right or left. Ever since I stopped watching the news, I've felt much better. I think young men have an apathy problem in today's society, and the left doesn't drive and inspire young men the same way the right does. Sure, some of it is the left being less hospitable and welcoming to men in general, but I think people are discounting just how appealing the right has become to many who are frustrated, feel forgotten, or are scared of what the world looks like around them. Whether it's right or wrong is not the point. The point is the left didn't give enough men a good enough reason to feel motivated to align with them, and the right did. I'm left learning, but I'll tell you this. The left is really unwelcoming to straight white men. They are basically told they are horrible people just for being who they are born as. Something the left is ironically supposed to be fighting against. The right welcomes these men, and then these men who may not have been as right-leaning before and now starting to veer down that path instead. I think it's honestly as simple as that. The left is alienating that group of people.